Monster High was maybe the first time I actually felt seen by a piece of media. To be honest, I don't think I would be this comfortable in my creative abilities if it weren't for Monster High. So I've decided to recreate and redesign my favorite characters, but with a twist. I want to redesign the ghouls and imagine what they would look like in different iconic decades. And I of course have to start with my favorite character, Draculaura, and she will be inspired by the 1950s. My absolute favorite Draculaura doll, ever since I was a kid, was the Forbidden Love 2-pack, so I will of course use her dress as the main inspiration for her whole design. I still used 1950s reference pictures, but this dress will be a main component of this whole outfit. Draculaura is 1,600 years old, so she has been alive for very many years. Side note, I feel like we're not talking about her age enough. Being 1,600 years old in the 2010s means she was alive during the fall of the Roman Empire. Anyways, since she has been alive for so long, that means she has seen so many different types of fashion trends. And I feel like she would probably keep and upcycle different items and trends from the past to make them look more up to date and modern. Draculaura has always been depicted as shorter than the other ghouls, and in the new generation she's a bit more curvy. So I had to redesign the entire body of my doll base and her face, of course, giving her fangs and the cute elf ears. I of course didn't have to change her body, but seeing the difference between them when she was printed made all of the extra work worth it. When starting any face up of any doll I make, I always make sure to seal it with something like Mr. Super Clear before, and then I lay the base by adding some undertones like yellow, blue, and a bit of red. This technique is something I picked up when I used to paint a lot of portraits, and adding these undertones just makes sure that everything seems a bit more alive. This also ensures that the base of the blushing has some ground to stand on and it doesn't look like a clown. In this stage, I like to make sure that I get the ears and I define the nose so I don't forget it later on. I also start defining the crease, and I keep in mind what I want the makeup to look like in the end, so I don't do anything too drastic. The same goes for the lips. I don't really need to blush the lips for this doll because I'm gonna do a bold lip, but I like to do it because that makes me kind of see the vision a bit better. Before I sketch out the details of the face up, I seal the face with a couple layers of something like Mr. Super Clear or any sealant that you want. I use a light brown pigment to map out where I want the eyebrows, and then I go in with a deep pink shade to really define the crease and give it a bit more depth. I wanted to incorporate the yellow shades of her outfit into her makeup somehow, so I decided to add a yellow eyeshadow. I know it's not super 50s, it's a bit more 60s, but just walk with me. I defined her eyebrows with a darker purple and pink shade before I started doing her eyeliner with black. I wanted her lips to be a really deep plum color, so before I started adding any color, I decided to go with a pure black base for her lips. After defining her eyebrows and giving her some wispy under eyelashes, I went in with that deep plum shade and added it to her lips while also defining her fangs with a white color. Before giving her final seal, I also glossed her waterline and lips with a couple layers of an acrylic gloss. The absolute last step of her face up was giving her some lashes, and then I could move on with making her eyes. I painted these 3D printed eye bases white before I could go in and add her actual eye color, which is gonna be purple. I didn't have much of a plan for her eyes, but I found these cute heart-shaped rhinestones that I decided to paint black to use for her irises. In the end, you can't really tell, but I think it's a cute detail that you can only see if you're really up close. Before I cured the first layer of resin, I added a bunch of glitter in different sizes and shades. In the end, I might have gone overboard, but oh well. I feel like Draculaura probably loves glitter anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And the purple shade really pops with the yellow eyeshadow, so I'm actually very happy with the result. I almost forgot I gave her some earrings as well. I also don't know if they're super 50s, but I found them in a drawer, so I added them because they matched the dress. When looking for inspiration for this doll, I came across a nail design that is really cute, but it isn't very common anymore. It used to be popular in the 50s, and it's kind of like a reverse French tip, I guess. Either way, I decided to use the same shade that I used for her lips for her nails, and I glossed them with the same gloss that I used for her lips as well. Now for the wig cap, I used this light pink stretchy fabric and hot glue. I know it's not very common to see hot glue used, but it worked fine. I didn't have time for regular glue to dry, and I wouldn't recommend washing her hair in hot water, but besides that, it actually worked okay. As a trash gremlin, I collect anything that I think could ever be useful, so I had this styrofoam and I used it as a base for her hair so I didn't have to tease her hair a bunch or be scared that her style would be undone. It's not something I've done before, but I really liked how it turned out and I will probably do it again. I also painted her entire wig cap black so it wouldn't be such a contrast to her hair and you couldn't see any bald spot, or if the hair moved you wouldn't see the scalp. Like I said before, I was in a rush and I didn't have time for any other glue to dry, so I used hot glue for the hair wefts, which I was kind of scared about because this hair is synthetic, which means it's plastic, and sometimes plastic and hot glue isn't a great combination. It doesn't really want to stick together, but it actually worked pretty well and I'm so glad because I hate regular glue. I hate waiting for anything to dry. It's my worst enemy and I want everything to be done as quickly as possible, so I will do this in the future. As you can see, I went around the entire base of the wig cap before moving on and doing her poof. I didn't really care if any glue showed in the crease because I will add a ribbon on top of it later on. And then I cut her bangs in the V shape. I actually saw a picture from the 50s with someone having that kind of bang, so that's why I added it. I changed this ribbon to a just plain yellow one, and then I used a low setting on a flat iron to give her those bouncy curls on the ends of her hair. I felt like something was missing, so I made these cute bows and I added tiny buttons on the middle of them as a nod to her original outfit that I love so much. And that means the wig is complete, and let's move on to the shoes. I sculpted and 3D printed these cute shoe bases. I made them with a little point at the toe because every inspiration photo I saw of shoes from the 50s had this pointed toe, and I of course painted them pink and black. Same thing with the wig, I felt like something was missing, so I added a yellow strap with a bow design. I felt like this really tied everything together, and I later went in and added a tiny button on the middle of the bow as well. Now I really wanted to keep her stockings from her G1 design, so I gave her some mesh socks. The reason I went with socks and not stockings was because I tried to avoid her waist. I knew her skirt would have a ton of layers and ruffles, and I didn't want her vest to look bulky or wrinkly. And for this vest, I went with the classic Draculaura pink color. I didn't know if vests were a thing that women usually wore in the 50s, but I found a couple reference images that showed how you could style them in a very 50s way. After sewing all the darts and sewing all the pieces together, I had this. I just had to add a closure and a couple details. I made a simple belt. Off cam, I changed the buckle to a heart instead of a square. For her blouse, I used the same pattern as the vest but with a few tweaks, and I also added big poofy sleeves. You can see I made it shorter and I removed the middle seam. When it came to the sleeves, I started off with gathering the top and then sewing an elastic band on the middle part of the sleeve. It's called this, which I of course don't know how to pronounce. I then added this cuff I cut off from a handkerchief I bought from a thrift store just because I liked the edge lace, which I also later used for the collar of her shirt. For the main part of the shirt, I sewed the pieces and the darts good size facing each other so I could then sew on the sleeves and the collar. When everything was assembled, I flipped the whole thing inside out so I could close the sleeves and the side parts of the front and back panel, and lastly I added a few snap buttons. As a final touch, I made a bow with a bat wing design that I sewed to the top of the vest. Now, for her skirt, I started off with the front panel that is going to connect both of the ruffled side panels. I didn't have any fabric with the small heart polka dots that I wanted, so I used a simple black cotton, which I then painted small hearts on, starting with white and then coloring them in with pink to match the rest of her outfit. I already made one side of her skirt, as you can see, but I started off with making this long strip of pink fabric that I then gathered. This piece will connect the second layer of the skirt to the first without sewing the first and second layer together with another. After gathering it, I then sewed it onto this lace that connects to the waistband. The reason I decided to not just sewing it directly to the waistband was because there's gonna be another pleated layer on top of this one. For all the pleated layers, I first added this polka dot lace before hemming it. I gathered this bath design lace that I then added to the end of the first two layers of the pleats. Here I'm trying to show you that I connected the middle front panel and the first pleated side panel together by sewing them good sides in. I then sewed the waistband and the first layer together, sewing them good sides in as well. And here you can see that I connected that first gathered strip to the lace, so I then could sew on the second pleated layer onto that gathered strip. I am so sorry if this doesn't make any sense. And then I did the exact same thing all over again for the last layer. To bring back that yellow from our color scheme, I made 6 small bows that I sewed onto the skirt with those same heart-shaped buttons I used for the headband. For the last part of this doll, I wanted to give her a delicate umbrella to shield her from the sun. So I made this simple pattern by folding a paper a bunch of times and cutting a little moon shape from the edges. For the ribs of the umbrella, I bent a bunch of paper clips to a V shape where one side was longer than the other. I did this so I can push the ribs into a straw I found. Since I wasn't concerned about being able to fold the umbrella, I could glue the ribs on the inside of the straw, and that made it so I wouldn't have a bunch of ugly metal sticks poking out on the inside of the umbrella. Now, I know I said the purpose of this umbrella was to shield her from the sun, but I decided to go with mesh and lace because I wanted all the details to be seen from both the inside and the outside. So maybe this umbrella is more of an accessory and not very functional. But I feel like we've seen Draculaura in the sun, and I know she always have some 500 SPF on her, so maybe this is more of an extra precaution and not really the main protection from the sun. I'm trying to give a reason why I chose to go with a fierce and cunty umbrella instead of a functional one, but I feel like you don't even care and you're mainly just here for the visuals and the vibes, so I hope you're not mad at me, and I know it's not very lore accurate, I guess. After I was finished with this umbrella, that meant that the entire doll was ready to be assembled, and I could finally see all of that hard work in all its glory. So I hope you're ready, because here is my 1950s Draculaura redesign.